Hello, welcome back to Beauty Bee. So I've done a somewhat similar video to this before where I edited down some palettes that were fairly large and definitely larger than they needed to be into more concise color stories. In this video, I am honing in a little bit more on a specific brand, in this case, NYX Cosmetics. Now NYX, let me scoot over so you'll be able to see the entire palette. These things are huge. Offers these big 40 pan eyeshadow palettes. I believe they have 4 of them, and these are both large in their array of shades. They are 40 shades, though just between you and me, I think most of them are really more like 30 shades and 10 duplicates. And they're actually physically quite large too. I would estimate that they're around the size of a Morphe palette. I'll put up a picture of someone holding it so you can get an idea of size. Now, I think NYX is aware that these are kind of large, maybe too large for their own good, because for 2 of these, they offer much smaller versions. For example, this is my NYX Ultimate Utopia palette. It's a 16 pan palette. Each of the shades I think is actually smaller than it would be in the 40 pan version, but all 16 of these shades do show up in the larger palette. In this video, I'm going to take the 4 40 pan NYX palettes and edit each of them down into a 16 pan. Now, spoiler alert, the Utopia palette that I came up with is not particularly similar to the one that NYX created, and NYX also had a version of the Escape Artist that was smaller, and I have edited my own version of that as well. So now that we're almost 3 minutes into filming and probably 2 minutes into the video, let's finally look at some palettes. Let's start with, I believe, the first one to come out, which is the Swear By It. This is the palette that I think Tati was all over a couple of years ago when it was first released. There's a lot of redundancy in this palette. I think there are probably 4 or 5 at least of these very grayed out brown shades that I think would look nearly identical, if not identical, on the eye. Really, I don't think this particular palette loses a lot when we move from 40 pans down to 16. Let's put the 16 pan up. They're both grungy rainbow palettes. They're both about half matte, half shimmer. I do think that you miss out a little bit on some of the really deep mattes in this smaller version. However, I was mostly aiming this at myself because, well, I know my own taste in makeup and my own preferences better than I know anyone else's. And those are shades that I tend to not really go through. I also just don't tend to distinguish too much between different really dark colors. You know, if it's a dark, cool matte, I'll just use it as a dark, cool matte, whether that's purple or blue or green. I don't really care. The way I've organized the 16 pan palette is more or less in a top half and a bottom half. I wanted the bottom half to be still somewhat grungy, but a little bit more on the primary side. The top half, I wanted to stick with the non-primary colors. This really purpley red, this mauve, an olive, somewhat sickly green. Those types of shades I wanted to keep to the top half because that is likely how I would choose to use them together. I can see myself going for an orange and yellow look, maybe with a little pop of blue from the bottom, because I guess I'm just stuck in 2017 YouTube beauty. But I could also see myself doing something with that gray and kind of weird, cool light gold with the mauve on the top. I actually like this edited down version a lot more than the larger one. I feel like I actually know what to do with the smaller version. The larger one, I mean, of course you can do every look that you could do with the smaller one with the larger palette because the shades in it are just a subset of those in the larger. However, I think that this palette guides me a little bit better. I look at the other palette and I'm like, okay, I'll just keep within a row, and I don't think I would get the variety that I would be looking for out of such a large palette. I really think that I would get essentially, let's see, can I divide? 8 different monochromatic looks. Next, let's move to the Modern Dreamer. Now, to me, this one looks very much like the Swear By It, with this exception of sort of a 3x4 neon almost area. However, when I cut down to a 16 pan, even though I got rid of most of those really, really bright shades, I feel like this is a much more pure take on these colors than we saw in Swear By It. And I feel like it's actually something that is somewhat missing from NYX's Rain. I don't think NYX has a palette that really captures the rainbow in this kind of way. They do have some really bright palettes. They have that NYX Vivid Brights, I think it is. I'll put up a picture of that. And they have these big 40 pan palettes, but they don't have anything that's this curated but offers such a nice variety of pretty pure colors. Admittedly, I do not think this is a palette that I personally would use super often. I do like the individual shades quite a bit, so maybe I would reach into it for a shimmery teal or a really nice matte purple. However, I don't think I would be making a whole lot of looks using just this shades from this palette. Now here we get into the Escape Artist. This is the first of the 2 palettes that we're going to look at that do have an equivalent 16 pan in NYX's line. I feel like this palette is pretty clearly a one-trick pony when I look at it. You can do a warm neutral look, maybe verging a little bit into pink, and you can add a pop of blue. That's it. You took 40 shades to tell that story. Now, when I edited this down, I decided to hone in a little bit more on the pink and purple. So I have the bottom half pretty much devoted to these pink, purple, veering somewhat into red shades with that requisite pop of blue, because it's really not an Escape Artist mini palette if you don't have at least one blue in there. But the top half I did keep for these very warm oranges and neutrals. For me personally, the second row would probably not get a ton of views. I don't like orange. It's just not my preferred color. I do like that matte yellow, however, and I think that kind of saves that row. However, I do think I would get quite a bit of use out of the rest of this palette. Something about the way that this is reorganized into that row of quite neutral neutrals. They're a bit yellow toned, but not super warm, is really appealing to me. I like this third row that goes very pink with a little bit into a sort of a burgundy brown as well. I could see myself using that a lot. And the last row with pinks and blues, also pretty. Probably wouldn't do a whole look using just that row the way I would with the other 2, but I could definitely see myself popping into that for some extra color. Compared to NYX's 16 pan version of the Escape Artist palette, I think they leaned a little bit more into the orange, which makes sense. I do still feel like that's the dominant color story in the larger palette, and really, is it in NYX's best interest to give you everything that the larger palette offers in a smaller form? I mean, probably not. Who's going to buy a 16 pan palette if you can get every single look with the, I think, $18 16 pan palette that you could with the 40 pan palette that costs twice as much money? So now for the piece de resistance, the NYX Utopia palette. This is so pretty. The 40 pan version is beautiful. I think it is everything that the Venus XL2, I think that's it, the very pink and green one from Lime Crime, wanted to be. So pretty. I love how it goes into pink and peach, but also into this very neutral silvery green shade. Beautiful, gorgeous. Really considered buying the 40 pan version when it came out, but I'm glad I didn't. I did, however, buy NYX's version of the 16 pan, and I think you can tell, even though I haven't owned this for a super long time, I have actually gotten quite a bit of use out of it. However, I realized when I was starting to sit down to make this video that it is not super similar to the version that I would have picked out had I been allowed to choose which 16 shades from the larger palette to include. Here is the version I came up with. Overall, this cleans very cool. Everything at or above this top left to bottom right diagonal is super cool toned. Very pretty. This is, I think, a perfect spring palette. In the lower left, we do have some things that feel a little bit warmer. There's a rose gold. There's a very pink shade that I think you could almost still call rose gold, emphasis on the rose. We've got this green glitter, which I think is looking a little bit darker in the picture, but it is this shade, so it is quite green. This almost comes off lime green in a swatch. I mean, there you can see that. Very bright. Springtime, but very much still appropriate for year-round, I feel. And in this lower left quad, we have this very pretty burgundy purple, rose gold, terracotta, and cream that I think would make a really easy but super beautiful everyday look. I wish I could buy this. Unfortunately, I can't. If these were actually available on the market, I would be all over this little 16 pan palette. I think it's so cute. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope you'll let me know down below and that you'll consider liking and subscribing. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!